Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel where I discuss Fantasy Formula 1. Today we're going to talk about the very important changes to the game that might greet you when you open the app or the website. Changes that I did not expect them to make so soon, and changes that are very welcome but also very scary for a few reasons. We're going to discuss everything about them, what they mean, what that changes for my plans, and what that should change for your plans, if that makes sense. I actually had an entire video recorded yesterday, but since all this information dropped now, I just scrapped that entire thing and have started to re-record it, because everything that I talked about yesterday was speculation, and well, now we have confirmation. I thought this wouldn't arrive until, Thursday, Friday at the latest, but they dropped today. So let's talk about Bearman, let's talk about Logan Sargeant, inactive drivers, and what this change means for us. If you didn't see it earlier this week on Twitter or other social media, it all started with this article from motorsport.com, right? Motorsport.com wrote an article about F1 Fantasy, and they said F1 Fantasy loophole exposed after Logan Sargeant was dropped by Williams. And you don't really need to read this article the entire way through. It just talks about this Logan Sargeant loophole that I've been discussing for weeks now, right? Me and other content creators and everyone online. People who had Logan Sargeant are very happy. People who don't have Logan Sargeant are very unhappy. I'm in like a happy medium. I'm like happy that I have him in my team, obviously, because he allowed me to do some pretty crazy stuff that I did not think was possible otherwise. But I also don't think it's in the spirit of the game to sit there with inactive drivers on your team. I don't think that should be a strategy that is allowed. You can debate with the wall. I'm not going to change my opinion on that. I'm not salty because I had Logan Sargeant, so, I was benefiting from it as well. But I don't think it should be in the spirit of the game. What's the spirit of the game? We can discuss that after the season is over. But this is the article, right? And this article, they spoke with some of they quoted some other F1 fantasy content creators and had a quote there from F1 Fantasy Hub, which I thought was pretty cool. Sometime here. Motorsport reached out to F1, and we understand the game will be updated to address the issue ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now, I don't know if this is... I wouldn't imagine this is because Motorsport specifically reached out to them about the loophole. So I actually would imagine that F1 and F1 Fantasy saw the grievances that people had with the Logan Sargeant loophole and sort of realized that this shouldn't be in the spirit of the game, and they are changing the rules. Now, the entire video I made yesterday that will remain in my it's sent to the garbage bin on my PC, but in that video I discussed different solutions that they could make and which ones I preferred. And now the one that I actually do prefer out of a game sense, but I don't prefer from a player sense, from a player who has Logan Sargeant, well, that is what they ended up doing, right? Rules clarification, non-active drivers. This is the announcement that now greets you once when you get into the F1 Fantasy site or on the F1 Fantasy app. From the Azerbaijan GP onwards, non-active drivers will be considered as not classified and subject to penalty points, -5 for qualifying and -20 for sprint and races. See more in the game rules. So this is not a rules clarification, this is a rules update. I would imagine this wasn't in the rules before. It's never worked like that before. And now every driver who is classified as inactive will receive essentially the DNF penalties, which is a -25 for a regular weekend and a -45 for a sprint weekend, which obviously means you need to sell them. Now, this is a clear hit towards the Sargeant Colapinto combo strategy that they, ended up releasing. And that was so very powerful because it allowed you to afford everything else, yada yada. You've seen my videos before, I hope. But what this also means, as sort of a knock-on effect on that, is that when a driver is inactive for just one race, see Carlos Sainz back in Saudi Arabia when he had his appendix burst, as well as now with Kevin Magnussen in Azerbaijan for his race ban. They also are now not classified, meaning that they will also be faced with the -25 points. Now, I don't know how this will affect a few things. One thing that we do not know is how will this affect price changes? Will the prices be locked for someone who's inactive? I personally hope so. And I also hope that these negatives don't count towards how the average is calculated for price increases and price falls. But that's something we're going to discuss a bit later. But we can go to the game rules now. I don't really care. This is my team. If you're like me and you're sitting with Logan Sargeant, the real only option you have is to transfer him out. There's no reason to keep Logan Sargeant inactive. Another change they could have made it so you can't make other transfers if you have an inactive driver. You need to address them first. That's what I thought they were going to do, but they ended up going the more extreme route. Now, in that sense, I think you could have foreseeably gone with this team for the rest of the season and not made any transfers at all, but that's no fun. But now you have no choice. You have to sell Logan Sargeant because otherwise you're going to be slapped with massive negatives every week, and you obviously do not want that. So what is the option? Well, in terms of value, the only thing that you really can go to, if you have Logan Sargeant and don't have Colapinto, it's the easiest choice in the world. You just buy Colapinto and call it a day. If you're like me, though, and have Colapinto and Logan Sargeant, which many people who do have Logan Sargeant have, the only option you have is go up to either Shogun Yu or Valtteri Bottas. Now, I can afford to go to Valtteri Bottas. I have 7.7 million in the bank after selling Sargeant, so I can go to Valtteri Bottas at 7.3 million, keep 0.4 in the bank, and call it a day. That could be my transfer, and it's very likely to be my transfer. Now, if you want to go cheaper, you can go for Shogun Yu at 6.8 million. The difference between Shogun Yu and Valtteri Bottas, at least the trend recently, right? I feel like Sauber has really given up this season. I don't think they're scoring a point. So, looking at the recent trajectory of points, he got Shogun Yu got 4 points in Monza, but -2 here, DNF here, so you can't really count it. 0 points in Hungary and -2 in Silverstone is dreadful, right? Really, really, really bad for Shogun Yu. Looking at Valtteri Bottas over that same period, at least he's getting positive points. So I do think that there's value in getting Bottas, and I think he could pop up with a price increase. I think he was very unlucky not to get it in Italy. Or in Monza, right? So if you can afford to go to Valtteri Bottas, I think you do. I don't think you go for Shogun Yu just because he's cheaper. I think just but I also wouldn't specifically sell anyone. I wouldn't go from an Oscar Piastri to a Carlos Sainz or a George Russell just to afford Valtteri Bottas over Shogun Yu. So while there's a difference there, and I think if you are like me and you have enough money, I think you just go for Valtteri Bottas. I don't think it's worth it, right? I think it's better to go for Valtteri Bottas over Shogun Yu, and I don't think it's worth upgrading a C-tier asset, if that makes sense. So the money value of Shogun Yu, say, I go for Shogun Yu here, can I even upgrade Albon here? No, I personally can't. I'm 0.3 million short, but if you can go for an Alex Albon to a Nico Hülkenberg, at that point you gotta go, okay, who's more valuable here? Albon, Hulk versus Bottas, Shogun Yu. Those negative points from Shogun Yu I think hurt more, and with him getting negative points so often, he's more likely to get a -2 decrease in price, which means that he's going to fall faster than Valtteri Bottas falls, if that's anything. But I think at this point we've discussed how bad C-tiers are in general and how C-tiers aren't important to our season going forward, that I don't think it really matters which one you go for. If you have to go for Shogun Yu, just go for Shogun Yu. I'm personally probably going to go for Bottas because there's nothing really that I can or want to upgrade. Yes, I would like to go, if I could keep Logan Sargeant and not get negatives for Logan Sargeant and go up from Albon to a Hulkenberg, for example, I would consider doing that. That's definitely not, that wouldn't have been off the cards for me if I could keep the Logan Sargeant strategy. But now I think I'm fine with sticking with Alex Albon. The Williams doesn't look that bad anyway, and I suspect Williams will be decent in Baku with their straight line speed. The next option, if I'm not just doing one move, and if maybe you're sitting there with a Logan Sargeant Colapinto team and you don't have any budget, the options you have is to downgrade elsewhere, because you have to sell Logan Sargeant. There's literally no other option. And the options you have of downgrading, I see a couple of them. I don't think anyone is selling McLaren. I don't think you should sell McLaren. The options you have, if you're sitting with Ferrari, you could downgrade to a Mercedes. That saves you 0.9 million. And I do think Mercedes is good. Ferrari looked a bit better in Monza, obviously, but it wasn't by much. It was by 15 points. I think it ended up being, no, maybe it was 19 points. It was something like that. It was below 20-point difference. And Mercedes could come with upgrades as well. So I don't see any reason for why Mercedes couldn't be above Ferrari in a particular race, right? So a downgrade from Ferrari to Mercedes is definitely on the cards. Another thing you could do is, say you don't have Alex Albon here, say you have something like a Hülkenberg, a Gasly, a Tsunoda, or a Magnussen. If you have Magnussen inactive, I think downgrading to an Alex Albon is also a good way to get the money to upgrade Sargeant. If you are at someone like a Kevin Magnussen, you could also downgrade to someone like a Hülkenberg, and maybe you still haven't. Maybe that is enough to upgrade Sargeant to Bottas. The last option I see is to downgrade one of your premium drivers to a George Russell mainly. This could also be a Carlos Sainz, 23.2 million, but I think the main one that people would look at is George Russell because he is at 21.1 million, and in that case I can actually afford to pick someone other than a Sauber asset. So say I want to go for something like this. I personally think this is spreading my team out too much. Running George Russell plus Ferrari here doesn't seem great because I want, if I have Ferrari here, I ideally want a Ferrari driver. I cannot afford a Carlos Sainz here. Carlos Sainz is 23.2 million. I'm 0.9 million short to go for like a Nico Hülkenberg here. Now that could also be a downgrade from Lando Norris. I'm not saying Lando Norris is must pick, but Lando Norris seems like the best 2x option right now, especially if McLaren are binning off their papaya rules, which, you know, some reports have stated. So I do think Lando Norris is the best 2x going forward, and I would expect him to win in Baku. But you never know. Oscar Piastri could just as likely pop up with a win there. So I don't think I'm personally going to downgrade Piastri because I don't have to, right? And I feel like Piastri is better than a George Russell plus a Hülkenberg. And I'd rather just run one of the bad Sauber assets, which, again, they are DNF risks. But, I mean, you're getting a DNF every week with the Logan Sargeant asset. So this is likely what I'm going to run in Azerbaijan. But we'll see come the deadline, more things could happen. Let's talk quickly about Magnussen and Ollie Bearman. So Ollie Bearman has been released in F1 Fantasy again, this time as a Haas asset, but if you pay attention, you may notice that it is the same asset as before. What I mean by that? Well, he comes in at 15 million. And if you remember when he got released for Ferrari back in Saudi Arabia, he was 14 million, had a good race with a driver of the day performance, went up by 1 million to 15 million, and then he was removed again for Sainz. They've reinstated him as a Haas asset at 15 million, which is terrible. It's utterly, utterly terrible. He is probably one of, if not the worst asset in the game at 15 million. And I would not touch this with a 10-foot long pole. If you don't know why, it's because at 15 million is the limit between C and B tier drivers, meaning that even if he performs well, he's not going to increase a lot in price. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. You know that this is his asset before, and they just switched it back. But I don't know why anyone would buy him, and I don't know why they chose this if they had the opportunity to. And I think this shows that they maybe don't have the option to add a new Oliver Bearman asset. But it also feels weird to me, because what if Perez had gotten kicked and Ricciardo had been moved up to Red Bull? Would there have been a Red Bull Ricciardo asset at only 11.1 million, right? Ricciardo is 11.1 million. If he gets upgraded to the Red Bull seat, will we have a Red Bull driver for 11.1 million? That is what it appears to be, because other than that, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't lower Oliver Bearman's price, right? He's not worth 15 million. He's not a B tier asset. I was expecting him to just be a mirror to what K-Mag was, similar to how Colapinto was a mirror to what Sargeant was at 4.8 million when Colapinto joined the game last weekend. But now Oliver Bearman is 15 million. He's not 12.8 or whatever K-Mag's at. Even if he had been at 12.8 million, I don't think it would have been worth going for him. I would have just picked Hülkenberg instead. If he had been at a cheaper price point around Nico Hülkenberg, Alex Albon, we could have discussed him as an asset. Now he's just a complete avoid. Oliver Bearman is a casual bait. I called it on Twitter because casuals might buy him just for fun. But he's not a valid option for F1 Fantasy, and we should not even think about it, especially considering he's just here for one race, and you have to sell him later with one of your free transfers, or he's going to accumulate negative 20 and negative 25, negative 25 or negative 45 points every weekend. So Oliver Bearman, a complete void. Similarly, I can't see Magnussen here, and I don't have Magnussen in any of my teams, so I can't show you it. And Magnussen is also classified as inactive in the game currently. So if you have K-Mag, you have to sell him, because otherwise you're going to be hit by a negative 25. And as for the best options to switch him to, I think a very underrated option that I discussed in my previous video is actually Lance Stroll. If you have money in the bank and you don't need to upgrade a Logan Sargeant to a Bottas, if you don't have Logan Sargeant, for example, if you have money in the bank, I wouldn't hate going for a Lance Stroll. Getting him at 14.7 million is pretty good. He's been good at Baku before. And looking at the points he get, apart from the last 2 weekends, like 7 points is definitely enough. 9 points, 12, 14 points, 12. Those points are definitely enough. Monaco doesn't count because Monaco is Monaco. Austria doesn't count because Austria is a sprint race. But he's definitely a driver that's likely to be above that point threshold as long as he doesn't DNF, right? And in that scenario, he's going to increase 1 million, not 1 million, but 0.5 million, which could give you enough to upgrade something else, such as getting like a Charles Leclerc or Oscar Piastri in there for your second B-tier drivers. So I don't hate going for a 1 week Lance Stroll punt if you're one sitting with K-Mag. If you're looking to move down though, and if you have K-Mag and Sargeant, which I've seen a few people have, I think the move this week is super simple. You just downgrade K-Mag to someone like a Nico Hülkenberg and upgrade your Sargeant asset to whatever you can afford, whether that's Alex Albon. I think those two are probably the best options for the price. You could also go for Pierre Gasly, though I don't know why you would go for Pierre Gasly over Hülkenberg and Albon. I think Williams just look better than Alpine right now. So I think Hülkenberg and Albon are by far the best options for the price. Quickly moved over to the F1 Fantasy Tools race result website, or race results site. Here you can pretty clearly see the points that everyone gets every weekend. And the reason I'm here is to discuss a particular thing about this new price change rule. And that is, not price change rule, but inactive driver rule. And how that affects price changes in particular. Because now we have assets that are inactive, such as Logan Sargeant and Ole Bearman and Kevin Magnussen. Ole Bearman not in Azerbaijan, of course, but he's going to be classed as inactive once we get to Singapore. And Kevin Magnussen this race. And these drivers are going to get negative points, right? Magnussen is going to get negative 25 in Azerbaijan. And Logan Sargeant is going to get negative 25 in Azerbaijan. How will this impact price changes? First of all, will inactive drivers change in price? Well, I tried to look into the rules, but I don't see anything there. It just says the DNF not classified penalties apply to all drivers, including those classed as inactive or otherwise not included in the final starting grid list for the race. This is the new rule they've added. But other than that, there's nothing about price changes here. There are 2 questions for this. First, do inactive drivers now change in price because they score negatively? My guess is no, because previously they scored 0 and didn't change in price, right? You know, a driver can't score 0 in a weekend. Let's just take Hülkenberg in Hungary, for example. He scored 0, overtakes 2, positions gained, negative 2, 0 points score in Hungary. And you look at price changes, Hülkenberg in Hungary decreased by 0.2. Easy. Right? Hülkenberg then, the inactive drivers then, who have been inactive before, say Logan Sargeant, got 0 points, didn't change in price. So I wouldn't imagine inactive drivers change in price despite their negative 25 points. What I also suspect is a no, but that we don't really know because they haven't gotten points before. Perhaps there's just something that writes them off. Will this affect the average score? Now, my guess is no. I don't know how they calculate the average score. I haven't actually gone through and done it manually myself. But they haven't divided it by 22 because there's been 22 drivers total in the game's code. So my guess is that inactive drivers are just removed from this, but now they've added a simple thing that adds negative 25 or subtracts 25 points from them if you have them in your team. But it's not guaranteed. It could end up being that the spaghetti code makes it so that the negative 25 is impacted on the average driver score, which would make it so that it's easier for drivers to increase in price. Again, I think this is a no, but we've seen and we've been surprised of how things work in F1 Fantasy before, so I give it a 10% chance of happening. And I was convinced they weren't gonna fix Logan Sargeant. I was wrong about that. I was convinced the Logan Sargeant loophole wouldn't exist. It did, so I was wrong about that. And I also thought they wouldn't add the negative 25 to them. I thought they would just make so you couldn't make other transfers. I was wrong about that too. So I've been wrong about everything in terms of what F1 Fantasy will do with their game this season. So it's just a thing, throwing it out there, that perhaps we could see C tiers rise in price more easily. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. As for what I think about all of this, I think this is good for the game. Again, spirit of the game was the spirit of the game. Just having drivers that drive, right? Although I disagree with how big the negative scores are in this game, you picking drivers that don't have any risk isn't fun, right? It's all part of the fun. And I was thinking about this watching the race in Monza. I was so used to looking at my 3 C-tier drivers that I was surprised when I realized there was only 2, because I was only caring about what happened to Colapinto and Albon. I didn't have anyone else on the grid, right? I had Logan Sargeant, and all the other races I've had 5 drivers that I've like looked for and seen like, oh, how will they perform? How are they doing? Are they getting overtakes? Are they on a good strategy? Will they do something stupid? I've always been looking at those other drivers that I've had in my team, and I just didn't have to because I had Colapinto and Albon and no one else. So I don't think it's in the spirit of the game, and I think it's good that they've added this. What's unfortunate is that a lot of people wildcarded or took negative 10s to get to Logan Sargeant based teams. Although I do think for most people it is quite easy to move away from it. But there are teams that are going to have a much harder time, right? Let's take this second team of mine as an example, right? This is my second team that I started in Shanghai for the specific Shanghai challenge, right? And this team has a way worse budget, obviously, because it started later. But it still has an 118.6 million. It's been running a lot of C-tier assets. It has no point to speak for it, though. But I have pure gasoline here, but I already have like Lando Norris and George Russell. And what this Logan Sargeant asset ends up doing for my second team is that I have to remove like a Lando Norris. Like if I do this, it's not enough to upgrade it to Shogun U. I would have to do something else, and I can't even. Where's Alex Albon? There we go. I have to like take a minus 10 to get to this. So that is very unfortunate for those of you who are stuck with it. Like imagine I was sitting with this much money in the bank, and this was a Sauber asset already. Like what do I do then? At that point, you kind of just have to get rid of Lando Norris and run like a Piastri 2x and pray that works. Because if you're someone sitting with 115 million in your budget and you were like running Logan Sargeant or Colapinto, it's going to be tight for budgets. And it's unfortunate that your team has ended up being in that position, and you might have to take a negative 20. But if you're in the position where you have to take a minus 10 or minus 20 to get rid of Logan Sargeant and restructure your team, it is worth it, because if you don't do it, you're going to get a minus 25 anyway. And the drivers you're bringing in will hopefully score points. You just got to hope that they, outweigh the damage that you're doing with removing like a Lando Norris or Ferrari. But for this team in particular, I might as well just do the transfers now because it's my second team and I don't really care about it. My move here, because I wouldn't get rid of Lando Norris, I would prefer to take a minus 10 here, would be this exact thing. So Alex Albon, and then here I can actually afford Valtteri Bottas. So I'm going to do this transfer right now for my second team. It's a minus 10 hit, and this is essentially just backing against Ferrari, right? I already had George Russell, so I might as well run Mercedes and hope that George Russell and Mercedes do well and Ferrari doesn't. Now, I'm a Ferrari fan, so I hope that doesn't happen. This is my second team, I don't care. But this is probably what I would be doing in a similar sense. I don't have the wild card, I already used it, so, it is what it is. No negative does not work to remove hits, by the way, if you didn't know that. But that is what my second team now looks like, with removing the inactive Logan Sargeant assets. So what do you think of Oli Bearman's price? What do you think of the inactive driver changes? Should we be given a free transfer if you have an inactive driver so you can remove them? Yes, no, do you think they need to change it for next year? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe. I'm announcing now I'm doing another deadline stream, as I've done for the past couple of races. It's been great fun. You don't want to miss it. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about, but I can spoil to you what the tip of the week is going to be. It's going to be remove your inactive drivers. But join me 2 hours before join me 2 hours before quali, 2 hours before the team lock deadline on Saturday before qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix deadline stream. It's gonna be a blast. We're gonna have fun. If you haven't joined the Discord yet or followed me on Twitter, link for that will be in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on Saturday. Goodbye.